Thanks again, Christina. I think we're going to move on to our final paper by the second dynamic duo of this panel. This presentation is by Dr. Caitlin Gillespie and Dan Moffat. So I'll introduce Kat first. Dr. Caitlin Gillespie is an assistant professor in the Department of Classical Studies at Brandeis University. Her research centers on defiant women in the early Roman Empire, and publications have examined imperial women, including Livia, Agrippina the Elder, Messalina, Agrippina the Younger, and Poppaea. Speak of, yes, as well as non-elite women such as Epicharis and non-Roman women, including Boudica. In her first book, Boudica, Warrior Woman of Roman Britain, was published in 2018 with Oxford University Press. And this conference is her first foray into reception studies. And she is joined by Dan Moffat. Dan Moffat is an audio engineer, musician, and journalist with the online music blog Alston Pudding. He also played in bands ranging from steampunk to indie bedroom pop, and has recorded everything from classical piano and violin duets to punk and metal. That is amazing. His current musical endeavors are released under the name The Collect Pond. For Alston Pudding, he developed an interview style that interweaves an in-depth look at an artist's music video with a conversation with the artist about method, music, and meaning. So they are co-presenting a presentation titled Feminist Anthems and Iron Age Queens, Heavy Metal's Obsession with Boudica.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? We're okay? All right, magical. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and we are going to get going. I want to thank Jeremy for that introduction and for to the organizers as well as our host university, Brandeis. We are so excited to be here. I'm Kat Gillespie and I will be doing the main talking during our presentation. Dan will be running the chat right now and handling the Q&A. So that's how we're dividing it right now, although we're happy to talk about anything that comes up as we're going through. So we are going to be talking about Boudica, also known as Boadicea. And amongst Boadicea's afterlife in various media, this warrior woman of first century Britain has found a home in heavy metal music. Her commanding visage even graces our conference poster. Thank you. So from the bands that bear her name to a metal opera that recreates her story, this Essenian leader and her revolt against the Romans in 60 or 61 CE continues to resonate with artists and audiences. In this paper, we analyze the presence of Boudica in the last decade of metal music and discuss her particular suitability to several subgenres. After considering the continued adaptability of her story to modern concerns and generic expectations, we'll close with an analysis of Ex Deo's lyrics video, Boudica, Queen of the Iceni, as an illustrative exemplum. We demonstrate that Boudica is by nature an agonistic figure who complicates the representation of gender and the hegemonic powerful masculinity that lies at the center or foundations of heavy metal music. We hope you will indulge us first in a brief archaeology of Boudica's presence in contemporary music writ large. We'll take a couple seconds. If you don't know the song title, I hope you could hear that. Some of our videos haven't been going so well, but if you don't know the song title or the original artist, you probably know the tune. Enya is, according to Pitchfork magazine, everywhere. The outsized influence of Ireland's top-selling solo artist is illustrated by the presence of Boadicea of 1987 in a plethora of musical genres. Since its release, it's become one of the most famous beats in the last 30 years of hip-hop, influencing musicians from the Fugees in Ready or Not, which happens to be Obama's favorite song, to P. Diddy, Rotimi and Whale, Meek Mill, and is name-checked as one of the, quote, greatest songs ever by electronic artist Grimes. Cemetery Zoo, a female-fronted band from Poland that identifies as black metal, uses Enya's Boadicea as an interlude on their split album Winter Ruins and Howling Mist of 2019. And Boadicea also appears in March to Glory by heavy metal's prog metal progenitors, Crimson Glory. So she's cited, but what is her story? I issue a content warning here about some female violence and violence against the self. So if you want to mute for the next 30 seconds, that is your prerogative. Boudica was incited to lead a revolt in Britain in 60 or 61 against the Romans after her husband died, and the Romans beat her, assaulted her daughters, claimed her land, and enslaved her relatives. Joined by her Essenian people and neighboring tribes, her army was able to burn Colchester to the ground, as well as London and St. Albans, taking neither prisoners nor spoils, until they were defeated by the Romans under the leadership of Suetonius Paulinus. Her story is told by the Roman historians Tacitus and Cassius Dio, and in each author, she gives powerful speeches before her final battle, rousing her troops to emerge victorious or die trying. Her vengeance, however, is complicated. After losing this battle, she dies, either by poison in the manner of Cleopatra, or of sickness, and is given a lavish funeral. Her death ends the rebellion, and although the Britons do not gain a lasting advantage over the Romans, Boudica has been celebrated as a nationalist icon, feminist figure, and image of rebellion. Content warning is over for now. But what makes Boudica a heavy? The origins of metal suggest that a Celtic warrior with an epic, bloody, violent storyline shrouded in occult practices and ritual sacrifice would fit, and indeed we argue that she does. But perhaps what makes her exceptional is the basic fact of her femaleness, that she is a strong female warrior queen who overcomes adversity. She's also the underdog, making her a sympathetic character. She's become a call to action for women in metal, particularly in the last decade. And women are successfully using Boudica to fight for space in a male-dominated metal scene. Even a brief survey of the Encyclopedia Metallum reveals Boudica's prominence in the genres in lyric, concept albums, and band names. While heavy metal traditionally focuses on men and notions of masculinity, Boudica offers a complex image of womanhood and heroism that counters traditional ancient Roman perspectives on gender and invites new interpretations of her actions, impact, and voice. In Cassius Dio's account, Boudica espouses an aggressive, powerful, martial masculinity while inhabiting the body of a woman. To Tacitus, she displays a powerful femininity that rises from her position as a mother and the leader of her people. She's a warrior woman who transcends traditional Roman expectations of the weakness of her sex and demands a more complex representation of gender and gendered identities. We broke down the appearances of Boudica in metal by subgenre, and we're posting some of the results here and before we highlight a few key themes. I realize that this text is small. It's all on our Google Drive if you want to look closer. But the point is to really point out the prominence in lyrics, song titles, concept albums, and band names from artists from all over the globe who identify with a range of subgenres in metal. White Skull and Ex Deo are on our Spotify playlist if you're listening along. While she appears in a few songs from the 1990s, her presence has blossomed in the last decade, even among long-standing bands. The range I find dizzying, and it speaks to her polyvalency and appeal. Boudica appears in everything from doom metal to epic, thrash to dark metal. In industrial metal band Dal Amrath's 2003, Boudica's Insurrection, Boudica becomes a William Wallace figure, and the song opens with Wallace's motivational speech from Braveheart, culminating in the phrase, "They'll never take our freedom." The combination of Celtic heroes speaks to the popularity of Celtic imagery and folk warriors of the past in metal. The song represents a trend that's grown to become an international phenomenon. That is, metal bands from Chile to Japan have embraced Celtic imagery in their music. Boudica figures prominently in this global movement. We were able to discuss Boudica's meaning with several bands named after the warrior queen. Madeline Mitchell, or Mads, the frontwoman of Australia's thrash metalcore band, who also identify as hardcore punk, Boudica contrasts their early song with a new album coming out this summer. And I have to issue a content warning about the lyrics that are on the next slide. In Boudica's Daughters, Mads emphasizes an idea of solidarity amongst wronged women. She notes concerning these lyrics It is definitely a statement of victim and survivor solidarity inspired by Boudica's rage for what was done to her daughters. The lead track on an album due to release in June or July of this year is called Millions of Dead Centurions, Londiniums, Burning. And I added the lyrics for contemplation. Mads told us that this song is putting Boudica's struggle up against the backdrop of a strong anti-colonial sentiment. It's very informed by my personal politics, learning, and experiences growing up playing in punk bands. Our new album presents stories of ancient and modern women in history and ties them all together. Boudica's website also has a land acknowledgement statement, and I appreciate Jeremy for doing one at the beginning of this conference. And their songs about Boudica fit into their overarching social consciousness, finding comparative material from the ancient world to help navigate modern issues is thematic across their oeuvre, and we see that in bands from Australia to Chile. The content warning for these lyrics is over. Boudica's story finds a place in power metal as a theme for full concept albums, including LA-based Warriors album Boudica of 2020 and Italian power metal band White Skull's Forever Fight of 2009. This 12-song concept album, voiced by Elisa de Palma, retells Boudica's story in an illustrative blend of Tacitus and Dio's accounts. I wanted to highlight one song from White Skull as indicative of her appeal to this particular subgenre. Boudica's speech is adapted from the speech that is created by Tacitus, although it excludes some very important gender considerations. The end of verse 2 and verse 3 are especially pertinent here. In contrast to the lyrics posted above, we have Tacitus's Boudica, who proclaims, "If you weigh troop numbers and war's reasons with me, you should either win on that field or perish. This is a woman's intention. You men may survive enslaved." White Skull removes the gendered language from Boudica's speech, and this is a key to her reception in power metal. For though the introduction of a female voice illustrates the continued development of metal to include more women, especially as vocalists, there remains an anxiety about countering narratives of powerful masculinity. By contrast, in second wave black metal, we take on the perspective of the Iceni, that is Boudica's people, and tend to focus on the theme of Boudica's vengeance and the bloodshed of her people and the Romans. The vocal register is similar across the following bands, manifesting in raspy shrieking, often indecipherable. Nevertheless, the emotions rise above the incoherency of the words. In UK-based Ethereal Forest, Boudica of 2015, we have the first person, the present tense, placing the lyricist in the position of an Essenian warrior fighting for vengeance, specifically in the moment between the burning of Colchester and the attack on London. The soldier is sure of victory and reminds us that Boudica's legacy still lives on, for true legends never die. We see similar themes in Spanish thrash black metal band Korgal the Exterminator and in The Conjured, cited below. When we look at Viking or epic or folk metal, we see the two exemplary genres for the employment of Boudica and multivarious themes that her narrative encapsulates. These subgenres have similarities in their approach to ancient stories, drawing from a catalog of figures that have escaped into generalized knowledge while using them as a jumping off point. In Belfast, the self-proclaimed only Viking folk metal band in Asia, we take up the black metal trend of taking on the persona of the Iceni, singing in Boudica of 2017, "We are the swords of Boudica, rise up Boudica, butcher them, all of these Romans will die." Chilean Negutram, who take their band name from a local indigenous tribe, the Mapuche word, meaning epic tale, also take on the Icenian character in Boudica of 2020, screaming for the goddess, shouting victory is her name. As a side note, the Celtic etymology of Boudica actually means victory, so well done for doing your research. We were able to discuss this song with Negutram's singer, Guillermo Fernandez, who notes the band's general interest in history, including the heritage and stories of the people of Chile. We asked Fernandez about the appeal of the Celtic heroine, and he said, "I'd say since folk metal started in Europe, most bands look for inspiration in the Viking, Celtic, or Slavic cultures." And when we asked whether he thought there was something in Boudica's story that appeals particularly to metal, he replied, "Well, I'd say Boudica's pretty metal. We think she's an important figure because she chose to be a warrior in a time where women were not necessarily driven to do so. And then she not only did that, but was actually capable of joining several tribes and peoples and then fighting the Colossus that was the Romans. Boudica was a strong leader in a world dominated by men, and we wanted to sing about that, pay homage to this character. So clearly, Boudica maintains a degree of cultural cachet in metal that crosses subgenres and continents. We now turn to Boudica in death metal. And I have to, I need to do a content warning for some of the lyrics that are coming up, and I will warn you before that happens. In death metal, bands tend to take on both Roman and Essenian perspectives, offering agonistic counterpoints that operate on the level of lyrics, sonic qualities, and instrumentation. Death metal is defined by guttural vocal styles, variously called death grunts, death vox, vocals, and Cookie Monster vocals. And according to Ian Christie, the genre uses, quote, speed and intensity to squeeze an album's worth of ideas into a single song. We can't agree more. Portland's melodic death and Viking metal band Boudica paid homage to the eponymous queen in their concept album Contra Imperium of 2016 and focused on Boudica herself in shadow of an eagle, adopting the Essenian perspective. The band's currently on hold, but lead singer Gillian Povey was kind enough to discuss Boudica with us and send some unpublished lyrics our way. She emphasizes that her band addressed other cultures' historical wars where people fought off their oppressors, and Boudica is just one of these. We asked, well, how did you get into Boudica then? Regarding Boudica, Povey says, I've always been a history buff. The story always spoke deeply to me because I understood her anger. When everything is taken from her and everything is done to cause her and her daughters that much humiliation and pain, I'm sure they were expected to break and accept their sad fate. Instead, that treatment gave her strength, and I absolutely love the revenge she got. Dan asked, why do you think Boudica's story appeals to metal? Well, I think metal has often been anti-establishment, anti-authoritarian. It's often dealt with difficult emotions, with anger, with pain. It's powerful, though, and transformative. And I think these moments from the past still resonate deeply with people. This resonance is also found in Ex Deo's Boudica, to which we now turn. Ex Deo identifies as a melodic symphonic death metal project that was founded by Maurizio Iacchino in 2008. Iacchino is also the leader of death metal band Cataclysm. Iacchino is a Canadian national whose parents were born in Italy, and he claims a strong connection to his Italian Roman roots. Discography includes Romulus of 2009, Caligula of 2012, Immortal Wars of 2017, which is about the Second Punic War, and the 13 Years of Nero from last year. Boudica is the first female-focused song on their entire discography and the fourth track on this most recent album. Track 5, by contrast, takes on the Roman perspective, but we're focusing on Boudica here. The group's webpage notes that standout opus Boudica, Queen of the Iceni, features the vocal stylings of Unleash the Archers frontwoman Brittany Slays, the album's weightiest, thunderous percussion work, and a glistening guitar solo. We decided to dive in deeper, looking at this lyrics video. The opening imagery highlights darkness and fire, and we're not playing the whole video. The sound hasn't quite synced up, so I've offered stills, and Dan will be posting a link to the video in the chat. I noticed the chat's very active. I'll deal with it later. The opening imagery highlights darkness and fire, displaying shadowy Roman columns, a Victorian-era statue of Boudica that we see in the background here. This is Boudica in her chariot by Thomas Thornycroft of 1902, and marching Romans in battle dress. We begin with this historical skit, as it were, and a male voice enters. Britannia must be annexed by orders of Emperor Nero under the prudent guidance of Seneca. While historically inaccurate, the vocalist has grabbed our attention, and he continues. In the first verse, I have to issue a content warning, so I won't be reading the lyrics, but maybe pause for the next 5 seconds. What strikes us in the first 2 verses is that the male vocalist takes on the persona of Boudica himself. You did this to me. You did this to my children. Not merely her warriors. His voice ranges from spoken word to high-pitched screams, classic death metal lower register growls, and lyrics go on to emphasize the unity of the Celtic warriors and the impending battle. Content warning over. Finally, more than 2.5 minutes into the song, female vocalist Brittany Slays, that is the front woman of Unleash the Archers and the winner of last year's Juno Award for Best Canadian Metal Album, check her out if you haven't already, she appears. Unlike Yakino, who gazes down or appears in profile, she looks directly at the camera, staring down her audience. She's in a modern interpretation of warrior garb, a dark tank top, but also a nose ring with weapons attached to her back. She stands in front of a green screen with a recreation of an early Roman British village characterized by stone houses. Her voice is lilting and melodic, in contrast to Yakino's alternating delivery styles. The river flows eternal, she sings. The gods, they whisper sacred hymns, nature's way of liberation through the eyes of fire. After a guitar break, she repeats the chorus, building the emotional intensity of the piece, and we return to the male vocalist in a direct agon. He's singing downwards, standing in a downpour of rain. At the end, we're cast into a screaming finale as the male vocalist growls "war" 4 times, and the image transitions to include other fighters, his other band members, and a bagpiper, and the Romans on the march. The skit ends with a brief epilogue. We return to the woman who declares the final sentence of Boudica's speech, directly taken from Cassius Dio. Let us therefore go against them, trusting boldly to good fortune. Let us show them their hares and foxes, trying to rule over dogs and wolves. We fade to black. Tacitus and Cassius Dio have had a clear impact on this new opus, while the video and images reflect modern conceptions of ancient Celtic identity. As male and female vocalists engage in a contest of power, they reflect an ancient battle between the Roman imperial system against a feminized other. However, this Boudica stares at the camera, refusing to be dominated. By closing with a direct quotation of Cassius Dio, she lays claim to power and asserts that she has won this vocal battle, at least for now. So to conclude, Boudica offers a unique figure for metal artists across the globe in her polyvalency and the agonistic nature of her martial conflict with a male Roman imperial power. Her story has an epic tragic quality that transcends genre. Her narrative is thematized around power, conflict, violence, and death, as well as gender. Various artists demonstrate a meaningful dialogue with antiquity inspired by the figure of Boudica and recorded in the histories of Tacitus and Cassius Dio, while utilizing the tools and expectations of subgenres to make her story their own. Metal is making more and more space for previously ignored or unheard voices, especially those of women. Boudica serves this purpose, claiming space for herself and her sex in genres that have tried to silence her. Indeed, her voice has never been silent, and I don't think it ever will be. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Kat and Dan, for that fantastic and well coordinated presentation there. With dropping all the links in the chat and giving us all those extra resources. I really appreciate that. Okay, so I'll go straight to the questions that we have a couple of so far. The first one comes from Amanda, and her question is, are you guys going to acknowledge / think about how all our depictions of Boudica are written in the context of men, like even the depictions of her being tough are really digs at Nero? Even a woman has more courage than our effeminate actor emperor. It all adheres to patriarchal standards and norms, so how is it subversive? Boudica's daughters are not even named. Do they ever even get a name?
Dan, do you want to start?
So when you're talking about who's writing about Boudica, we're talking about Tacitus and Dio. Are you talking about the lyricists, or are you talking about the historians?
I just was saying, like, any kind of depiction we get of Boudica, right? Even the positive things that we can pull of her. Like, one, we don't even really know her name either, right? Like, the term that we use for her is a word that could be like victory, right? So it's this unnamed woman who's constantly being alluded to by men that are named. So any kind of depiction we get of Boudica, even the positive things, are really things that were written by men in order to insult other men by comparing them to a woman. So I was just like wondering what you thought of that, and if you are going to discuss that or unpack it at all.
Yeah, well, I could point towards the ancient sources. I've thought a lot about this, and maybe two avenues, one more hopeful maybe than the other, is that at least in the ancient sources, she's also countered with females. So we just heard a lot about Messalina, and in Cassius Dio, she makes fun of Messalina as well as like a power-hungry woman who doesn't do it right. And she makes fun of Agrippina the Younger. As you note, she makes a pointed contrast with Nero as an effeminate leader. So there is this, she's being filtered through a male the perspective of historians who are male. But she's not limited in her critique of the Romans to only Roman male leaders. The other thing that I would point out, at least in modern interpretations, is I think this is what I actually love about looking at reception, is that examining Boudica via female-fronted bands and female vocalists actually is making more space for her, and reinterpreting her or building out an interpretation that is perhaps one that can reach beyond that patriarchal hegemonic male perspective.
Okay, we'll move on to our next question, which comes from Antonino. And he asks, are there any comparable cases with Veleda, the Boudica-like priest / commander of the Batavians in 69 CE? She looks a bit underrated character in comparison with Boudica.
Dan, can you think of any?
Of any other characters?
Yeah, if we have any comparisons with Veleda.
No, I didn't come across, but I'm sure that hopefully the Encyclopedia Metallum can spit out a few for us. But that's good. I'll check that out.
That's a really good point, because you would expect, because Veleda gets such a strong voice, especially in Tacitus's histories, that she would have at least a somewhat comparable cachet, and especially because she is specifically a prophetess. So Boudica has some, prophet type qualities amongst her, but Veleda would be a really interesting figure. So if anyone needs inspiration, go write that song.
Right. Ralph in the chat mentions Hadefolk, and he's asking if they might mention Veleda in their, they have an album about the Batavian revolt, so that might be a place to look.
I hope so.
Yeah. Also, while we're on the topic, I'm thinking of Christian Truderslev's work on Tomyris in metal as another kind of comparable Boudica-like figure with a very similar narrative, and it seems to be presented in similar ways by a band like A Sound of Thunder, which has a really memorable song about Tomyris. So I'm glad that came up. Because more of those figures, there's a lot of potential there, as you mentioned. And speaking of Ralph, he has a question. Could the apparent international / intercultural appeal of Boudica relate to the fact that she derives from a culture largely lost, that is pre-English Eastern Britain, and sources from an imperial perspective, leaving her as a somewhat free-floating, easily adaptable figure?
I think that, well, I read an interview with an ethnomusicologist talking about how Celtic culture kind of comes around and comes back into popularity. And so I think Boudica in a lot of ways has been she's been thrown into this Celtic culture, film, television, theater, which is kind of pervasive around the world. Dr. Gillespie talked about Braveheart being sampled in the beginning of Dol Amroth. We've got, Britannia, or the Guillermo from Negutrum in Chile talked about how they started doing with folk metal, started with Celtic themes, because that just seemed to be what you do. It's how he felt about it anyway. And so, you know, he was influenced by Britannia and the show Vikings. At the Globe Theatre in London, there was a play a couple of years ago about Boudica, and music by The Clash, London Calling, was used when Boudica is kind of rounding your troops to battle. So I guess, yeah, there's this loose Celticness that is pretty popular globally, that even though that she comes from a lost tribe, the Iceni, she's been adopted by the Celticness of what's going on at the moment, I'd say.
Yeah, and as Greg in the chat pointed out, yeah, Celtic is a very flexible signifier, and I think what we're doing here is we're sort of we're previewing maybe some discussions from for tomorrow, which will where Greg and others will dive into you know, the Celtic stuff proper, to see its resonances with metal. So I'm glad there's a connection there. And Greg also says, I couldn't help but notice the one band Belfast. Is this meant to play into the ideas of Celts as brave resistors of empire?
You know, they've got a pretty, they got a pretty strong kind of mission statement on their webpage. I don't recall coming across that, how they chose that name. He was the lead singer was kind enough to send me the a lyric sheet, but didn't get back to me on further questions. But that's that. If he reaches back, I'll send you what he says.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised though. I think there's a lot, there's not only to be said about the Celticness, but also in kind of an anti-imperialist sentiment in kind of the decolonialist dialogues that were introduced yesterday that are happening in metal. I think there's a lot, there's just so much coordination happening across continents that really struck us, that we were able to interview bands from 4 different continents for this presentation. So there's something there that's not just about kind of Celtic as a catch-all signifier.
Okay, looks like that's it for questions. So yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up that last remark, Kat, because you know, when we think about global pre-modernity, it's not just the global kind of span of the material that bands can engage with here, but it's also, you know, the bands themselves come from all over the world engaging with material that is not necessarily, you know, at least geographically, you know, of continuity with them. And I think that's where we see a lot of very interesting perspectives on it, such as, you know, Christian's paper on, you know, looking at how a band like the Taiwanese Chthonic is looking at aspects of Greek mythology. And so I just, that's, and, you know, we see this is why, you know, diversifying, you know, the field of classics is so important, is that, you know, this is an example of, you know, what perspectives, you know, could be brought to the table here. Hey, but we'll that's another conversation. So thanks again thanks again to Dan and Kat and Christina and Antonino and Francesco for that wonderful panel. I learned a lot and thought a lot about a lot of things that pertain to other things people would talk about at this conference.